America's most famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, is known for projects like Falling Water and the Guggenheim Museum. However, Wright's direct and indirect influences can be seen here in Louisville and in Frankfort. In this episode of Renovate Louisville, we'll take a look at one of Louisville's unique office buildings, a house with the name Prairie, and an original Frank Lloyd Wright house in Frankfort just down the road.
In 1991, Frank Lloyd Wright was recognized by the American Institute of Architects as the greatest American architect of all time. Through his career, Wright designed more than 1,000 projects, which resulted in more than 500 completed works. In April 1907, Wright's fireproof house for $5,000 design was featured in the Ladies' Home Journal. A variation of the design for this inexpensive home provided a basis for a stucco-covered, wood-framed home in Frankfort, Kentucky. The Prairie-style Ziegler house was built in 1910, while just 3 blocks away, construction of the new Capitol building was underway.
This represents a Prairie-style house. That was Wright's signature style until about 1912, something like that, and he built a couple of Prairie-style houses after that as well. The dominant feature of the Prairie-style house is the horizontal lines, which would reflect the horizontal nature of the Great Plains, the prairies. The banding that goes around the house, that gives it a horizontal emphasis. The roof line with the very wide overhangs give it a horizontal emphasis. And then the interior of the house, with the same kind of banding exists throughout the house inside. The bricks on the fireplace, if you notice the bricks on the fireplace, they're long and they're narrow, and the horizontal edges are very prominent. The vertical edges of joints are obscured, and that gives it a strong horizontal emphasis.
Typical of Wright's Prairie house designs, the front entrance of the house is off to the side and not easily noticeable. You enter the house into a compressed space to create a more intimate area for the host to greet their guests. That space then opens up to the living space. Each room of this home, except one, has access to the outside.
Frank does have you connected in both worlds at the same time, so that light is constantly coming in through all of the windows and doors around.
There are 30 art glass windows and doors in the house. The windows and doors are typical of Wright's work in Prairie houses. It reflects also Wright's theme of bringing the outside into the house. What you see is the art glass when you see the house does a wonderful job with the light coming into the house. And that's one of the really grand things about living in this house, is that every day is a new discovery.
The home also features a backlit cabinet above the fireplace. The cabinet's art glass has a square within a square motif, which is common in Wright's art glass designs. Woodrow Wilson is reported to have been one of Reverend Ziegler's more famous guests in the home.
I like to imagine the house as it was in its original setting without the other houses around here, and Frank designing the public space of the house with the art glass windows along the dining room wall. The entire wall is covered with windows, and I can imagine looking up and seeing the new Capitol, which was being built at the same time as this house was built. So you must have had the best view of that new world that was new government that was being created up on the hill.
I've never been bored living in this house because I wake up to something new and fresh every day.
While Frank Lloyd Wright did not design any building in Louisville, his design aesthetic greatly influenced 2 buildings constructed in the 1940s. Frank Lloyd Wright was a hero for architect Bruce Goff, who designed the Bartman House, also known as Prairie, which was constructed in 1941. Goff was considered an architectural prodigy whose relationship with Frank Lloyd Wright began early on in his career.
Both Bruce Goff and Frank Lloyd Wright were heavily influenced by their environment. They would take a look at the site, at its inherent qualities, assess those qualities, and then design a residence that was in harmony with that particular setting. In this case, Prairie, as the house is known, was built in a wooded site in a rural setting. Bruce Goff selected a triangular design so that he could take advantage of the sweeping views and the beautiful countryside.
It's such a unique structure and a challenge and such a work of a creative genius. It's basically a handcrafted piece of art. Mrs. Bartman apparently gave Goff a budget of about $3,500 to $3,800, which in the late 30s, early 40s would buy you a very nice house in any good neighborhood of Louisville. According to documentation that I have from the Art Institute in Chicago, this house cost over $17,400. Now that's a sizable overrun. Apparently there were no qualms on the part of Mrs. Bartman. She just simply paid the bills, went on with it, and finished the house.
Prairie was intended to be one of a series of vacation homes in the Fern Creek area of Louisville. However, this is the only home that was built with this design concept in mind. The home earned the name Prairie because of the building's triangular shape and floor plan, and also because the winged appearance of the building suggests an airplane.
It was built in 1942, right before the material shortages caused by World War II. When the building was being constructed, it was so unusual in terms of its structural design that passers-by thought that there was an airplane being constructed on the site rather than a house.
Bruce Goff incorporated industrial building technologies and broad expanses of glass into his designs.
In the instance of Prairie, he built his building with windows that were shaped like triangles. The windows were used particularly at the apexes of the triangle. So when you're on the inside of the building, it would give you a feeling of that interpenetration of interior and exterior space. It would make what's really a very small house feel a lot more spacious. Bruce Goff was all about using linear elements, at least in this design for Prairie. The broad overhanging eaves that you see on Prairie are composed of 2-inch pieces of redwood. They create a really striking linear effect and a lot of positive and negative shadows and light and so forth. They also shielded the inside of the house from an inordinate amount of sunlight.
Unfortunately, the structure suffered a devastating fire 17 years after it was constructed, causing parts of the structure to be rebuilt. With modifications from different owners over time, the building didn't always appear in its original form.
The interior of it was basically covered up with a redwood paneling. As you could tell from looking at interior photographs, black and white photographs that I had from the Art Institute, that this was not the original interior. So, you know, you'd sit there and look at the interior, and finally it would just get to the point where, well, let's take down a panel, let's take down some of this redwood and see what we find. You know, it was pretty archaeology. You just didn't know from day to day whether you were going to find charred wood, damaged wood from the fire, or whether you were going to find, in many cases, we found original, intact structure, 4x4 members that were redwood that you could see in the original photograph. So we slowly started taking away some of the interior. Then I think it all got the best of me, and then I started taking away some of the exterior and have basically uncovered a couple sides of the house, which turned out to have all the original framing. The glass is missing, so I've been slowly rebuilding and replicating and putting pieces of glass back in. It's definitely a labor of love.
While Prairie, considered to be Jefferson County's first modern home, remains off the beaten path, another modern building in Louisville, influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright, is well known and called by many names.
It's a Louisville landmark, and it's a fantastically unique building that was built way ahead of its time. So a lot of the features are really groundbreaking features in the engineering and in the solar screen. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Wright always felt like form follows function. So he wanted to have a harmonious design, and some people get it and they like it, and some people don't.
Cayden Tower, originally built for Lincoln Income Life Insurance in 1965 for $2.7 million, was designed by Wright's successor firm, William Wesley Peters and Taliesin Architects.
The fellow that owned Lincoln Income Life, his name was John Acree, was a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan. and wanted Frank Lloyd Wright to do a building for him here in Louisville. So he contacted Taliesin, and there were some preliminary ideas and drawings done, and then Frank Lloyd Wright passed away. And his son, William Wesley Peters, took over the commission. They continued working together, and Mr. Peters finished the drawings and was in charge of the actual construction. And Frank Lloyd Wright's wife also was involved in doing some of the exterior finishes and the colors.
The 15-story building is built using cantilevers to support the floor beams on one end. The tower consists of a central core that acts like a spine, and the floors are suspended with steel cables and cantilevered steel beams. This design allows for the building to have the overhanging structures as part of its design. The building's exterior design serves various functions. While providing a decorative element for the building, the lacework panels made of a special lightweight concrete material also serve as a solar screen for the building. The panels block incoming sunlight while still allowing the interior to remain bright. Another feature of the building is the satellite structure, which originally served as a branch for Liberty National Bank.
It's a really great design, and it's a really interesting drive-through, and it totally mimics the doily structure of the exterior of the building.
Cayden Tower also features an exterior elevator which provides a bird's eye view of the city and a basement auditorium where you can see the design motif repeated.
There's a pond in the back that was supposed to be a cooling pond for the HVAC, which was ahead of its time, which didn't work exactly like they wanted it to, but now it's a beautiful feature of the building.
When Cayden Companies purchased the building in 1986, they were committed to restoring the building while maintaining the building's original design.
And William Wesley Peters was 89 years old, and we flew him out here so that he could oversee how we wanted to renovate the building and how we wanted to bring it back to its original splendor, because it had been run down. We didn't want to go rogue or cowboy. We wanted to work with Wes. And so Wes, he redid the parking lot here, he redid the HVAC. We got E.R. Ronald, who was the original structural engineer and HVAC engineer. We brought him back. He was 85. You know, we had all these old guys back, and they did a wonderful job. So we were working on the color, and Mrs. Wright picked out the original color. And so we said, okay, we need a new color for the building. And so 1 month went by, 2 months went by. And finally, after talking to him every week, he sent us a color. And the color was brown. And we liked it. And he said, we sent it back. We said, we love it. He said, I'm going to tweak it a little. So weeks went by. 2 more months went by. We got a color. And we opened it up. We all were anticipating this great color. It was pink. So he spent 4 months. It ended up being pink. So we kept it pink. I think it's great that we have Frank Lloyd Wright's influence here in Louisville. I think he was the greatest architect of the 20th century.
While Frank Lloyd Wright's influence and architecture can be found in many locations, the man considered to be the greatest American architect of all time left his imprint on 3 distinctly different buildings in Kentucky.
You're watching Metro TV, a public service of Louisville Metro government.